Hello, my philosopher mystics. It has been a while, but I thought I would come to you with a chapter in Nikolai Berdyev's The Destiny of Man that I have not read. I like coming on here and using the opportunity to read something I haven't yet, instead of maybe just rehash what I have, so we can enter the space of spontaneity and stepping into the unknown to generate something perhaps more intimate and magical than we could if we even slightly only predicted it. So Nikolai Berdyaev, if you haven't heard of him, and he was a recommendation to me that I'm very grateful for. He lived from 1874 to 1948, a Russian Christian existentialist philosopher. I would say if Dostoevsky had written nonfiction philosophy instead of literature, like this, it reminds me of how he might have written and what he might have contemplated. So I am not even this far in the book. I just kind of intuitively chose a chapter. And this is chapter 3 of maybe the last part, I think. Yes, there are 3 parts in this book. Part 1 is principles. Part 2 is morality on this side of good and evil. And part 3 are of the last things. So this is the very last chapter, I guess. And this book is, I don't completely know. This book is about going beyond good and evil, but not necessarily, I think, in a Nietzschean way. You know, Nietzsche really wanted to reevaluate the values, and he had his own list of virtues and vices that were the inverse of what he saw around him, especially in his interpretation of Christianity, Pauline Christianity. Those virtues for Nietzsche were ones of strength and empowerment and overcoming, self-overcoming continually. He said that human beings were a bridge. And he critiqued Christianity for sort of enabling and coddling what he saw as weakness. And Berdyaev looks at good and evil as 2 sides of the same coin. So good is not necessarily transcending evil. Good allows evil to exist. They both show up as this dualism that exists together. And if we want to transcend evil, we also have to transcend good. And so what then that looks like for Berdyaev, I'm not sure. I think what I'm hearing that Berdyaev is sort of creating a space for is a status that is a co-creator with God, the ultimate creator, And a mindset and embodiment and practice of creativity, freedom, and play. So perhaps there is sort of a void, an emptiness, a question in my mind of what, where he's going with this, what he's envisioning. I think that it is kind of a sort of primordial void, a primordial darkness that's generative, that's a womb. And it has to be that because we haven't created it. We haven't fashioned it. It is sort of the Taoist, energy of generation. And it is a becoming. It is sort of a dynamic, a movement, a dance. And it is, and what is beyond good and evil is the space to carry that out continuously. But then again, I could be wrong. I think, though, that chapter 3, when he's talking about, the very title, that's my alarm to turn off tech. Hold on. Okay. I have an alarm that goes off around 4:30 every day, so I can turn off my phone. And ideally all tech, but I need to do this today. So the title is Paradise Beyond Good and Evil. So there will be something that can help us. I think man is tormented by the presentiment of hell, but deep down in his heart lives the memory and the dream of paradise, and the dream and the memory seem to be one. Our life passes between paradise and hell. We are exiles from paradise, but we have not yet come to hell. In the midst of our world, which is so completely unlike heaven, we think of paradise in the past, at the beginning, and in the future, at the end. The earliest past and the final future come together in the idea of paradise. The myth of the Golden Age in the pagan world was a myth of paradise. Pagan mythological consciousness knows the Golden Age in the past, but has no messianic expectation of the paradise to come. Only the ancient Israel had that expectation. Mythology is always concerned with the past and messianism with the future. The biblical story of paradise as the original state of man and nature is a myth in the realistic sense of the word, but the prophecies, the expectation of the coming of the Messiah and of the kingdom of God are messianic. The Bible combines mythology and messianism. So I think this is interesting, and I'm not sure if I'm just missing his point. I would say that when Berdyaev talks about non-Christian religions, I hesitate to completely embrace what he's saying. And this is an example, I think. Again, unless I'm missing his point. But I do not see in my reading of myth and non-Christian religions an obsession with only the past. Because mythology in ancient indigenous peoples tend to be very cyclic. And so you look at Hinduism and sort of the, I forget, the name of it escapes me, but it's this cycle of the 4 yugas. And, you have this golden age, this wonderful yuga, and the era, and you start to sort of descend into an increasingly corruptible existence, where the last and worst era the Hindus have said we are currently in is the Kali Yuga, and that is the one where we're only on one leg of virtue, and we lie, we're not spiritual, the food and the water are polluted and corrupted, and there's strife, and there's war, and there's disease and dissatisfaction and despair, etc. Now, a lot of spiritual people, if that didn't resonate with you, if you thought, well, I actually think there's kind of a movement of spirituality, I would agree with you. And I think that many spiritual people now say that we have passed the Kali age and we're in a transitional period heading toward a more golden age. But there is a golden age that you continually return to. And so if you are not in is it called the Sattva age? If you were not in the golden age, I'll just go with that, then paradise is in the future. It's just that paradise is not eternal, because everything is cyclic. Like, you think about the Aztecs and the legend of the 5 suns. Now, with that, I think there are 2 ways to interpret it. The 5th sun is supposed to be a golden age. Actually, the past was not, unless I'm misremembering, the past was not a golden age. It actually started, the first sun started with, I think, Tezcatlipoca. I really should remember this because I just finished my world mythology class and I lectured on it at one point. Sorry, my computer, my laptop, my setup is not great here on my little desk. But it was the sun. It was the son of the sort of mysterious jaguar god that and I think that darkness in myth is very generative, and that's where creation happens. So it's not necessarily that it was a sort of negative age, but it was an unconscious age. It was an age where things were coming into being, and there was maybe there was order in the sense that there's harmony in creation, but there was also chaos in that so much was happening. And the 5th sun, I think, is associated with Quetzalcoatl, the serpent, the plumed serpent, which is kind of almost a Jesus character, with, being a god of the wind and wisdom and light. So, and the question is, with the Aztec myth of the 5 suns, if the 5th sun is the last sun, or I think there is, because if you think about like the sacrifice, the sacrificial rituals that happened in Aztec culture, I think there was going to be a continual kind of vulnerability and anxiety that this sun too could be swallowed. But if it did disappear, if we did move into another sun, then there would be a return. it might be a spiraling return, like the major arcana in tarot, that every time you return to card 0, the Fool, it's on a higher level than you experienced before. And, I know that there are, like, I'm thinking about the Toltec Prophecies book, where there's not only the 5th sun, but there is a cycle, but you continually evolve into higher and higher consciousness. And so there's a 6th sun and a 7th sun, etc. I don't think that is traditional, though, but if we allow myth to evolve, then our intuition is going to be a part of it. So I think of that, and you could also look at Buddhism and the idea of nirvana. And of course, you have this, question, who or what experiences bliss if there's no self? But it is described as a state of bliss, even if there is nothing or no one to experience the bliss. And so that, that is not the past, and that is not a hellish existence. And there are more examples that I could probably think of. So I don't think that Christianity has sort of the monopoly on thinking about the future and thinking about paradise. But I do like what he says about our ideas that the paradise is in the past and in the future, because we have all of these myths that are still very apparent today, that there must have been a golden age where, people lived closer to nature, maybe, thinking about like Atlantis, and also we think that we can have some form of that again. And I think that we have this intuition. It's kind of like the intuition that we can't prove, right? We have like an intuition of free will, although we can explain logically in a way that makes sense determinism. I think that paradise in different qualities, Richard Rudd would call it the siddhis, and the potential of the human species to evolve consciously, to go past or transmute the shadow self, to balance the material and the spiritual more, to expand on love instead of try to possess it and feel jealousy, to control it, to manage it, having excessive self-love or excessive other love. We can imagine more perfect versions of, and more ideal, more aspirational and desirable versions of both the immaterial and the material world. And that's one of the, I think, important ideas in my mind that I'm reflecting on lately is our desire for beauty. I think beauty has gotten sort of a bad rap, with our ideas that maybe to want to be beautiful or to want to be in beautiful places is shallow. And studies have shown that when people live in, like, let's say nature is beautiful, I think universally human beings love mountains and oceans and trees and the wild landscapes of Ireland, and we love nature. So nature, can we agree, is beautiful. And there have been studies, empirical investigations, that say that when people have some green space in their neighborhood as opposed to living in a concrete jungle, there are physical and mental benefits to that. So this is a part. So beauty is really a biological kind of part of who we are. And, I think that beauty has been sort of shelved because of it's not cost efficient. Why do Americans take trips to other places in the world that have history and that have, amazing architecture, have preserved kind of, ancient sites? It's because those are beautiful. There was a value to beauty, to a beautiful building, to an ornate sort of, exterior and beautiful paintings. And, I think that, or, think about people who have, lots of money. What would you do with money? You would travel to see beautiful places, and or you would try to have a beautiful living area, maybe with some waterfalls and some walls of greenery and, beautiful like seating area or meditation garden, a beautiful view that you can, sit out on your balcony and look at the ocean. You would incorporate beauty. So then is beauty, looked at as a luxury? I also think that beauty gets criticized in terms of our bodies. There's a lot of criticism, but also longing and desire to be physically beautiful. And I think we've tried to kind of work around that and toward that in different ways. But I do not think that having preferences about beauty, I think that that's a part of, I think Berdyaev would agree, that that's a part of creativity and play and the uniqueness of the human spirit, the juxtaposition of the human and divine, that we can imagine and that we can each gather together to contribute a beautiful chorus and constellation of what is beautiful, and there's no limit to it, right? So I don't think demonizing any kind of aspect of beauty is really in the spirit of creativity and expansion, an infinite sort of, I guess, journey and movement. Just because human beings have limitations currently doesn't mean that we shouldn't try or continue to imagine and desire the ideal. I think sort of the fear and the unfortunate consequence of wanting to exceed the human limitations of beauty in the material world is that we can't do it through material means, And so a lot of times our attempts to maintain or increase our bodily beauty, that's judged, but would it be judged if it was accessible to all and it was actually attainable? I think that beauty, among other virtues, among other like platonic forms, among other sort of ideal states, those are in our future. And I think that's why we intuit heaven. That's why we intuit paradise. That's why we intuit past golden ages, because there is some truth to it. It feels like we're remembering something. It feels like we're wanting something that's possible. I think it is possible, but I think that embodied beauty, first of all, I'll just continue talking about that for just 1 second more since I started. I think it's attainable in an indirect way, in an energetic way. I think it's a part of our elevated consciousness. I don't think that, I think that there's a material outcome and consequence, but we have to go through the inner self. We have to go through the inner world. And this is just my theory. And I think too, we can have a world without beauty, without beautiful buildings and environments. We can have that. And I think that we're in danger of heading that direction in terms of valuing and prioritizing utility, cost efficiency, technology. Not that technology can't be beautiful, but the element of the aesthetic is not automatically implied. But I don't know if I want to live in that world. I want to live in a world that prioritizes beauty, creating space for it. And that may mean taking away in some places rather than adding, or before we can add and create. For instance, if nature and green space are so beautiful, there are places in the US where I am that have that and that allow that. But, what are the unnecessary constructions in architecture that have caused us to, put a parking lot over a park? So there might be some tearing down before there's like this growth that's allowed. But I don't know, these are my thoughts. And then I think when he says our life passes between paradise and hell, that feels very psychic and metaphysical to me concerning our emotions. So let's do one more paragraph. The cosmic process starts from paradise and begins with the exile from it. But on earth, man not merely recalls the lost paradise, he is also capable of experiencing moments of heavenly bliss through the contemplation of God, truth, and beauty, through love and creative ecstasy. I love that. I love that. See, I haven't read this chapter, so I need to highlight that part. Everywhere he talks about beauty, I want to highlight. And I missed this part. Where am I? Sorry, just 1 second. Yes, I love all of the words he's using here. So much. Paradise exists, not merely in man's memories, dreams, and creative imagination. It is preserved in the beauty of nature. Okay, we were just talking about that. In the sunlight, the shining stars, the blue sky, the virgin snow of the mountain peaks, the seas and the rivers, the forests and cornfields, the precious stones and flowers, and the splendor of the animal world. The culture of ancient Greece and its plastic beauty was a glimpse of paradise in the history of human civilization. The cosmic process began with paradise and is going towards paradise, but towards hell also. Man recalls paradise in the past at the source of the world life. He dreams of paradise in the future at the end of things, and at the same time, with horror, he anticipates hell. Paradise at the beginning, paradise and hell at the end. Hell seems to be the only gain made in the cosmic process. Hell is the new reality to be revealed at the end of cosmic life. Paradise is not new, it is a return to what has been. But how sad will be the return to paradise of one part of mankind when the other will have gone to perdition. Such appears to be the result of eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge. So I'm really interested in where he is going with this. I think one of his critiques is that in the way we talk about the good and seek the good, we also maintain hell. And there's something problematic in the idea that we have created a hell in our imagination, that we endorse and desire a hell for certain maybe people to go to. And yeah, I'm really interested in seeing where he's going to go. I love that he talked about architecture and nature. That's exactly what we were talking about. I want to know more what he thinks and what he means by hell. One thought I had that I forgot to include when I was talking about beauty is that, one question I have is how and when do we feel beautiful? I think the feeling of beauty is also or ultimately what we are after when we want to be beautiful. And I think that the feeling of it is separate. What does it mean to feel beautiful? I think it means to feel. I think feelings themselves are beautiful, maybe specific types of feelings. But when I think about when and where and how I feel really beautiful, I feel it when I'm seen in a way that resonates with what I know to be true about myself. Simone Weil said attention is prayer. So there's an element of devotion to it. I think that I feel, and many of us feel beautiful when we're listening to some music and dancing in the quiet and the shadows of where we live. And we feel like somehow we feel a part of the music. We feel like the music is speaking and directed to us, and we feel desirable, we feel wanted, we feel loved, we feel worthy. And we could have zero recognition of how we look at that moment, but the feeling is complete and wonderful. I feel beautiful when I'm energized by a conversation. I feel like the energetic field itself is beautiful. And it's not that I feel beautiful, it's that I'm participating in beauty and I've become an open vessel to receive it. And I don't think that changes physically our environment or ourselves, but it's just as good, and it's a part of my intuitive kind of theory that is the path and that is the way to then somehow changing our environment and changing ourselves. Of course, I know that gets a little bit fanciful for some of you, so I won't go into it too much. It is kind of a part of this like new age spirituality of manifestation. But you know, that is the pool in which I swim, or at least wade a bit from time to time. I will end there because it's the end of the semester for me. I just had my last world mythology class, which might be why I'm on here making this video, because I'm a bit sad. I will miss them. I had a really wonderful group. I felt seen. I felt like we held space for each other. I felt like they allowed me to be creative and be creative in my assignments. And anyway, I won't go into it, but you know, I have to grade, I have to make something to eat, and I need to detach from technology. It's really important to me. I think there's a lot of health benefits to limiting our use of tech, and I think my best way of doing that is when it gets dark outside to then switch to a mode where I'm just reading my books and I'm not on the laptop or the phone. So anyway, I hope that you loved Nikolai Berdyaev. I am really in love with him and his work. I'm so excited to read him, and this will definitely be one of the first books that I finish this winter break. I'm excited to get into it, but I have a couple of weeks where I have to do work. My 10-page paper for epistemology is due on the 17th of December this month. Grades for my community college are due next week on Wednesday, the 9th, I think it is. So I need to grade assignment 3. And then I don't know when grades are actually due for my university, but I'm guessing it's around the time when my paper is due. And I was sort of in survival mode at the beginning of this semester, which is also why I haven't posted a lot on social media and created content. And I apologize. I spent time with all of you, but I've been better for a while, but then catching up is sort of what I need to do. And so I need to go back in time and give my students feedback on assignments that I graded but did not say anything about. So I have a lot to do, but classes are over, so no more prepping for lectures. I hope that you are all staying warm and cozy if you are in the part of the world that is wintry and cold right now, or becoming that way. Put a comment or a question. I always love that. My sort of motive or purpose here is just to gather us all together and find like-minded people who love books and love talking about, deep subjects, meaningful subjects, and who can do it with curiosity and openness and humility and honor what we don't know. Be well, everyone, my Earth Angels.